Hey y'all, welcome back to the Body Space. Just me this week. I know I had a couple guests the last 2 weeks, and we have more coming, but I wanted to chat today about our ideas of discipline. I've done a lot of content in the last several years on my Instagram, in writing, in just conversations with clients in regards to, I guess you could say, the psychology of discipline, the pieces that are missing when it comes to our traditional understanding, the way that nervous system capacity is going to come into the chat for this, but also just the way that our conventional narratives on kind of pushing through and making the thing happen are actually doing us a great disservice in many parts of our lives, which only compounds over time and usually ends up hitting a wall. And I have some really good little client case studies today because this is a conversation I have pretty often with my clients I work mostly with clients who come from a background of hyper discipline, override, basically like pushing through, doing the most. They end up in a season of what I have described on this podcast before as body-led forced surrender, which basically is your crash, your burnout, your chronic pain, your chronic illness. It could be an accumulation. It could be external factors in your life that kind of all come up at once. I refer to those as energy explosions, like the car accident plus breaking up with your boyfriend plus losing your job plus like just boom, perfect storm for this full review of your life and how you've been treating your body and like all of these things, right? But typically our season of body-led forced surrender is coming from a place of like, I have been overriding my body's cues for so long in the name of doing the thing that eventually something's got to give. Eventually the body talks. And usually at the point of body-led forced surrender, this is the point at which we are forced to stop, but not the first time the message has come in, right? So we've had the message several times. We've wondered maybe what we should do, if we should do things differently, and we've continued to push through, we've continued to override. So for context, I'm working with a lot of those people, which means now they're in a season where they've been forced to surrender. And it can go a couple of ways. They keep cycling back to the old way of doing and then getting pushed back and landing on their face because the body no longer wants to work and move from override. Or they get into fragility beliefs and collapse. And all of these correlate to nervous system states, right? As in the larger picture of your life, they end up collapsing and having trouble remobilizing. And then all of these fears and ideas about fragility and being basically the trauma from like the last time I pushed through and disciplined and made the thing happen, I crashed. So now I'm doing very, very little. I'm in my soft girl era. I'm not really pushing. I'm not really stimulating my body, and realizing that we actually can continue to feel worse in that place because our capacity in the system will continue to go down as we are not using it. So, I talk about this a lot on my page. The goal is to incrementally increase capacity, to learn how to move and operate in any disciplinary part of your life, not from a place of override, but from a place of deeply understanding your body's cues, learning to listen. And that comes with building a trusting relationship with it, because we struggle to listen to our bodies because we don't believe that it will ever be any other way. In other words, for example, oh, I can't rest today because then I'll want to rest every day and the fire will never come back. That is inherently not true. The body is ebbing and flowing. The fire will always come back. The desire will come back. The energy will come back. Do you trust that that is the case? Or are you in a black and white absolutist kind of relationship with your body whereby what you're experiencing in this moment is all you can see, right? And so the question that comes up a lot when we're trying to find, and I'm going to break down my kind of like philosophy on discipline a little bit deeper in the first part here. But the question becomes, okay, if I can't discipline in the old way, I'm in this weird limbo where like, how do I know right? Like, how do I know if my body is actually calling? How do I read my body's cues? How do I know if my body is genuinely calling for rest or something different today versus we just got to mobilize, right? Not necessarily push through override, but know when, yes, I do have the capacity, I just need to mobilize, because sometimes the body and the system will have trouble mobilizing. But that doesn't mean that we can't handle stimulation and intensity. It means we need to know the difference between what's a true call for rest and what is, come on, let's get up, let's do the thing, right? So I think what people really struggle with is knowing the difference. It becomes very black and white. It becomes, I'm either really pushing through all the time and I'm not listening, or I'm deeply listening, but I'm never activating intensity. I'm not getting a high level of sensation. I'm not incrementally building nervous system capacity. I'm not building stability and strength in my joints and my muscles. Like it really is, it feels like we've been taught and conditioned to be in one or the other. And both of them lead to burnout and collapse, right? So the question is, how do I know the difference? How do I learn to know the difference between this is a true call for rest and recovery and this is actually just you've got to do a little bit of pushing through here and mobilize, because discipline is important, right? And the answer is, my analogy for this is always relationships. And it's not something that you're going to know right away. It's something that you're going to build over time. So maybe there are days when you went way too hard and afterwards you're like, okay, I shouldn't have gone that hard. This was not the time for that. My body was not there. And then there are days when like you don't really push, you don't really do it. You're not really like moving through. And you're like, yeah, actually, I would have done better with some mobilization. I would have done better with a little bit of like maybe disciplinary push through, not override, but mobilization. And the only way to learn how to do that is to stumble and to just over and over and over and over and over again respond in the best way possible until you have repair. And it really is like building any other relationship. When you start building a relationship with somebody, friendship, romantic relationship, anything like that, you don't know right away how this person communicates. You don't know right away if you can trust them. All of those things are built over time, right? So at the very beginning, all of our little old circuits are firing with like, oh, the way they said that, or I haven't heard from them in 48 hours, or all of our circuits are firing, making assumptions about what all that means when we're still learning how this person communicates and how they operate in connection and in relationships. And maybe a year or 2 or 3 go by, and because you know how this person operates, when you get certain signals from them, you trust them. You trust the process, and you have like an understanding of trust between you that hadn't been built previously, but it was built with the back and forth of communication, with moments of dysregulation, with all of that, with conflict. That's how it was built. And so it's a very interesting question for me when people say, how do I know the difference? Because it's like, you're not going to if you have never put the long-term work in to actually build a relationship with your body. And that's where we land at the reality of the fact that most of us haven't. Disciplining, forcing your body to do the thing, pushing through, never listening to sensation, being completely checked out from that, not being connected interoceptively, not understanding your body's cues, outsourcing your trust to a program or a meal plan or a person because you have to follow something other than your body, which can be helpful in tandem with body dialogue, but in lieu of, it's just an outsourcing of your own trust and sovereignty in your body, right? Like, most of us go through our whole lives with this externally defined definition of discipline. That's something we execute without ever actually being in relationship with our bodies at all. So it's no secret that we don't know how to know the difference between these two ends of the coin, because we have never gone through the work of building that relationship. And that relationship is messy. It's full of pushing a little bit too far, learning, when you override capacity, learning when you need to mobilize capacity, swinging maybe a little bit back and forth into those hyper and hypoaroused states in the nervous system, and eventually being able to, one, have the capacity to visit those places, but two, being able to read this, being able to read this. So starting with reframing discipline, I think most of us were taught that discipline, like I said before, is from override. We don't actually listen to body's cues. We subject our body to a structure that we have determined as a progressive way to hit the goals that we want to hit, but we're not really actually listening to what the body is communicating to us, what the nervous system is communicating to us in the context of what that process looks like, right? So again, it's outsourced, it's externally defined, and it not only is it not connected to the body, but the process, being in the process of the discipline itself, is often further disassociating, if that makes sense. So when we end up continuing to push and push and push from override, which basically means my body is sending me cues about needs that it has, resourcing that it requires from me, and I'm not hearing those cues, I'm just continuing to do the thing. Yeah. That usually begins to come online and become obvious when we have any kind of a cycling inconsistency, whether it's food, exercise, any morning routine, night routine, discipline, business, whatever those like disciplinary goals are, we start to have swinging. We start to have seasons where we're like really fucking locked in and seasons where we totally fall off. Right? So there's a lack of long-term, even keel consistency. And we know that our bodies are swinging between basically a state of maybe having enough capacity to handle that override and then going through seasons where we're so depleted that we can't do it. The body is calling for us to listen during those seasons. But if we don't listen, we end up maybe resting for a while, maybe crashing out for a while, and then going right back to the same way of doing things, right? That swing can happen for a while. But it's important to understand that the longer it happens, the further we are depleting our capacity. And when I say capacity, I really mean like the strength of the nervous system to hold all of that. The more that you keep overriding and swinging and overriding and swinging, eventually, most of us, if we do that for a while, we end up landing at that total breakdown, that body-led forced surrender. Whether it looks like extreme metabolic health issues, like thyroid issues, insulin resistance from long-term chronic stress, from underfueling, from overtraining. Like it can look in that realm, like, hey, your body is not responding to weight loss efforts anymore because of how much you've overridden and overridden and overridden in the name of the discipline of this thing, right? It could look like long-term overuse injury that is circling back or presenting itself as your stress bucket in your life as a whole is overflowing, or just like mechanical issues from pushing through poor training. From a nervous system level, I mean, this is where we've talked about the stress bucket before. The stress bucket in your whole life as a whole overflows, and that's when the nervous system becomes sensitized. So even a shoulder injury from 7 years ago that has not bothered you since then could surface with pain again after you go through the crazy breakup and lose your job, because the stress bucket of the nervous system as a whole has become so heavy that all these things are now popping up as these weak links, right? But whatever the nature of your season of body-led forced surrender, it could be an autoimmune disease, chronic illness, chronic fatigue, total like emotional breakdown. Like it could be tissue breakdown. It could be all these things, right? This is like the concept that is the core of the topic and the coaching that I do. But essentially, my belief is that long-term disciplinary action from a place of overriding the body's cues will most likely land us in this place every time. Some people can go longer than others without getting there. Some people are so disassociated that maybe they don't know. Point is, it's a gift to be led to this place because it forces you how to learn how to do things differently. Okay, that's the first type of discipline. So when we're talking about how we get conditioned into that place as well, right? I think it's really important to touch on the fact that we have been conditioned to believe that the body inherently does not desire to move, inherently does not desire to be fit, inherently does not desire to do things that we define as hard things, inherently does not desire to eat well, right? We've been conditioned under this belief since we were young that if the body is left undisciplined, unperimetered, unwatched, if we let ourselves just do whatever we want to do, that we would overeat, we would eat all the wrong things, we would be couch potatoes, we would never move our bodies, we'd be lazy as hell, and we'd be fat. That is, if you look at the way we view being locked in, being on track, being disciplined, it is stemming from that belief. And so the first major thing is like, what would change in your habits and your approach to discipline if we flipped that belief? And we actually started from an embodied place to believe that the body fundamentally desires nutritious food. It desires to move and exert in ways that are cathartic and sometimes intense and, yes, challenging. It desires to be fit. It desires to be healthy. It desires to not overeat, right? Like, hold on, what would it be like if I believed that? Is like the first question, right? But also, where is truth? And why is it that this first belief seems so true? When I let myself off the hook, yeah, I am eating 16 cinnamon buns. I am sitting on the couch. Okay. So if that's true and I'm proved that every time, then the only thing left to do is override and discipline and override and discipline and override and discipline. And as soon as I stop doing that, I'm back here. Oh, but that proved to me that I needed this in order to be on track. And so I'm back here again. And it's like, yeah, but the question is it possible that this undisciplined place of like, I naturally want to be a couch potato is actually coming from an after effect of having pushed through for so long that now my body is so under-resourced, so under-capacitated that that's where I'm landing. But that a body that is well-resourced, a body that has high capacity, a body that is vital and healthy and nutrient dense, desires to move, desires to exert, desires to play, desires to work out, does not desire to be on the couch all day, does not desire to overeat, desires to eat nutritious foods, desires to eat when it's hungry and stop when it's full. Like, could the truth that we have conditioned ourselves to believe actually just be a result of our approach? So we believe our approach is because of this truth, but really the truth is being created by the approach. In other words, if you continue to override your body's cues, if you continue to discipline past those signals your body is giving you, if you don't take the time to build a relationship, which takes time and trust, a trusting relationship with your body and your system and the cues it is giving you, and you, from that place, the only way that you know how to get shit done is to override because you're not listening, then yeah, you're going to land in a place where when you're not doing that, it's going to feel like low resourcing. It's going to feel like lack of discipline. It's going to feel like my natural state. But what if that is not your natural state? What if your natural state is completely different when you are well-resourced and in high capacity? What if you could believe that resourcing yourself deeply first, deep nutritional replenishment, deep mineral replenishment, all of that, terrain support, functional nutrition, all of that, deep rest, circadian, getting your circadian back on track, and incremental work in nervous system capacity, both in the somatic world and in the physical tissue handling load, moving your joints, corrective exercise world. What if you could believe that when those things are fully supported, all of this actually is natural for you, and not only is override not ideal, but it's simply not necessary? That completely changes the entire experience. So there's a lot more psychology there with hyperdiscipline. I have a couple posts about it on my Instagram. Like, another interesting piece is that the way we discipline ourselves, fitness is just such a good example, but it could be with anything in your life, food, business, anything, habits. But the way that we discipline ourselves typically is how it was modeled for us as children. So how our parents raised us is how we're now, in effect, raising or parenting ourselves, which shows us the way that we build structures for ourselves, the way that we discipline, the way that we make plans, the way that we make routines, the way that we allow ourselves choice or don't allow ourselves choice, which is a really interesting thing. And I think most of us who are adults now, and that's starting to change, but I'm a millennial. I know that most millennials feel this way. Generationally, parenting norms during that time were pretty much a direct denial of personal sovereignty, meaning that disciplining a child was very much about forcefulness, very much about, there was very little like giving children choice, creating healthy perimeters, but then within those perimeters, giving them choice, giving them sovereignty. So a lot of us as adults, we have this like fundamental psychological wounding where we were denied personal sovereignty at such a young age that there's a part of us as adults still trying to individuate, still trying to assert that personal sovereignty, right? And I've talked about this a lot on Instagram as well. Physical training and altering your body is one way to do that. So it's a good way to get addicted to it. But the other piece is like, now you are modeling unconsciously the way that your parents parented you. So you're building your gym routine and you're going to go do the thing. And the way that you discipline yourself is the way that you were disciplined, which means there's no wiggle room. It's either on track and it's perfect or it's not. There's no sovereignty in this place. It is, I have to do it this way. It has to be on track, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the issue with that is that there's always going to be this deep psychological part of us resisting that discipline in the same way that we are still resisting the denial of personal sovereignty that our parents provided for us. So if you are disciplining yourself in a way that is denying you personal sovereignty, which for me is the body dialogue, is the listening to the body's cues and giving yourself choice in how you respond, having a gray area, having a wiggle room, having a view of consistency and a definition of consistency that is not black and white. It gets to be gray. It gets to be malleable. It gets to be in response to how this is feeling. It gets to be in proportion to the capacity of this thing. It gets to be not always at the highest degree or not at all, but maybe I could do something here in between because I'm feeling exactly where I am today and it's not there, but it's not there either, right? That's what I mean when I say personal sovereignty. So personal sovereignty is directly tied to your ability to dialogue and have relationship with your body. And if that was denied us at a young age, then that's a relationship that was never built. So we're actually resisting our own goals for ourselves because our minds want to accomplish something, but our bodies just want to be sovereignous. So how do you have both at the same time, right? And again, it's all about building discipline from a place of body relationship as opposed to from a place of body override. And now back to another tangent. A lot of people are like, well, if I build it based on body relationship and I build it based on listening to my body's cues, then there's no way I'm going to be as consistent as I would be if I was overriding. Because there's always going to be something. I'm always going to be a little tired. I'm always going to have something going on. So the belief that if you fully listen to your body, you will never actually be disciplined is again resting on the faulty belief. I'm losing my train of thought. Is again resting on the faulty belief that I inherently don't desire to do these things. My body will never mobilize naturally. My body will never want to do it. I have to force. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to eat healthy. I don't want to, because I've never built a relationship where I've shown my body how good those things feel. Or I've never built a relationship where I'm realizing the reason that I'm resistant to those things is because one part of me wants health and the other part of me wants sovereignty. And laying on the couch all day, eating donuts and not being disciplined feels like sovereignty when all you've ever known is how to force yourself to do things. It feels like, I remember when I was dealing with like binge eating during my like eating disorder, overtraining, it wasn't just the physiological state of being fucking starving. It was also like, oh my God, like I've been on track. I've been doing the thing. I've been forcing myself every day to like do this thing. And like, I want to have a little toddler tantrum. I want to like stop listening. I don't want to do it anymore. This parent on my shoulder that is me is so fucking annoying. I wanted those things. I liked those things, but it was my approach, my relationship with it was so forceful, was so black and white, was so from override. Like, not only was my physical body and my nervous system so fucking exhausted because I couldn't even feel when I was hungry for more food and actually listen to that without fear. But it was also just like, God, I want to make the choice. I want to be sovereignist. I don't want to be forced. Like, it really was like this toddler tantrum of like, oh, maybe the point is like this, the deeper psychology of this. Maybe the way I'm approaching this is actually not in service to what I'm trying to build. Right. So, kind of back to the two types of discipline. From override, you are swinging back and forth, having trouble finding consistency, or you maybe have consistency because you're really good at it, like I was, but you're like very slowly depleting that capacity. You have aches and pains. Your lab work maybe is starting to struggle with a couple of things, and then eventually you get to this place of depletion. You have that full on breakdown. You have the body-led forced surrender season, whatever that looks like for you, and you're forced to completely alter this relationship with discipline. And then maybe you swing over to the side of immobilization, collapse, fragility, pain, symptoms, chronic illness, fear, hypervigilance. Oh my God, I can't go back to that because that's going to hurt me. So, but you get worse because the more that you stay immobilized and you don't find intensity and you don't find incremental ways to build nervous system capacity back up so that that hypersensitized state can quiet down, you continue to lose capacity by doing nothing, right? And the answer, and then maybe in that place, you then, I'm doing it. Okay, you swing back to the override again. And so now you're in the swing, the burnout swing, right? Or you're in total burnout because you can't even swing anymore. And so the only way out truly is build a relationship with the body. Start to understand discipline from a place of attunement and a place of relationship so that gradually you're building your attunement by noticing interoceptive cues and responding to them. So when you're building a relationship with someone else, you notice the cues, you start to learn who they are, how they feel, their reactions to things. And when that happens and there's a need for repair, you attune to each other and you create corrective experiences whereby trust is built. That's how you do it with your body. It could be as simple as, I'm craving watermelon. What if I just followed through and gave my body the thing that was feeling pleasurable right now, right? Not in every case, right? But giving yourself sovereignty, giving yourself choice within the parameters of parenting that say something like, yes, but I know ultimately what's healthy. Yes, but I have certain standards for movement for the week. Like the malleability of that, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot here. I go on a ton of tangents and stuff. The other tangent to the second piece there is like, it only works when you learn how to deeply resource your body. So if discipline feels for you like it has to be from override and there's no other way, like the only way you can mobilize yourself is from override, and then you keep doing the burnout swing and the burnout swing, it's because on some plane of existence, whether it's nutritionally, calorically, sleep, circadian, minerals, nervous system, emotional stress bucket in your life as a whole, your body is not feeling well resourced. Because if your body were feeling well resourced, it would inherently want to move, it would inherently want to eat well, right? So in building that relationship, we need to, alongside that process, learn how to build internal resourcing, somatically, physiologically, in your movement. Because without that, it really is going to feel like this is all bullshit. But I can promise you, a body, when well resourced, desires the same things that you desire for yourself up here. If there's a disconnect between how your body's behaving and how your mind desires to behave, it's all going to be low resourcing. It's 100% of the time. I really believe that. So back to the client case study of like, well, how do I tell the difference? that relationship is built slowly over time. You're not going to know the difference right away. You're going to work on resourcing. You're going to work on listening and responding. And that's why Body Talks is built as a structure that is in the gray area of malleability, right? Like we have a structure, we have intensity, we have movement, but you're always in dialogue with your body on any given day. And there's an entire spectrum of what consistency can look like. And that is built differently for each person based on them, which is why the level of attunement works so well. And it's so different than just like, do this program, subject yourself to this meal plan, because that is completely decontextualized from this person's life, what they've been through, what they're experiencing, what their capacity is. It has to be here. It has to be. Otherwise, it's going to be here. And that is not fun. That depletes capacity over time. That depletes nutrients, minerals. It's stressful. It hurts. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. So yeah, resourcing, relationship. The piece I want to bring in with client case study is resistance, because this is another piece, and you'll see in the title, like basically learning the body's cues. How do I know the difference between override and healthy resistance? Which basically means override is not listening, pushing through. Healthy resistance is my system is feeling resistance to doing this. Even if I'm well-resourced, I should desire, right? I'm still having this resistance. How do I know when this is a resistance to push through and mobilize through versus this is my body telling me not today? That is the difficult part. So I had a client, we started about a month ago. She's amazing. And she has a long history of chronic illness, body-led forced surrender, chronic pain, like MCAS, dysautonomia, long history of trauma, ADHD. She basically is me, which I fucking love. Fucking love it. And she's been doing a lot of nervous system work on capacity building, mobilization, and she's realized, oh my God, like one of the missing links for me is movement. Like I was such a high performer for so long. My whole life was built on override. My whole life was built on discipline. My body broke down, basically. And I swung into this kind of soft girl era, right? I swung into this, I'm not using discipline at all. I'm just always listening to my body. I don't want to do anything too hard. I don't want to execute too much intensity. I'm like anti-intensity, right? And she learned after a while of being there that her body felt worse in that place. Her body felt worse if she overrode, but her body also felt worse if she collapsed. Go figure. So she ended up in a session I did for my friend Dana's workshop, which was really, really cool, which I'll be doing again. She does a ton of nervous system work, and I came in to do the movement portion. And I basically talked about in the nervous system work, the way that movement is a necessary part of that somatic healing journey, and not just any movement, but very intentional stability building, slow capacity building movement that allows you to begin to experience incremental levels of intensity in your muscle, in your tissue, with load, without load, that starts to carve out and expand your body's zone of safety, which in that season of body-led forced surrender, of chronic pain, chronic illness, total nervous system collapse, has become very small. Your world has become small. Your zone of safety has become small. The level of stimulation and intensity and responsibility that you can handle in your life has become very small and will only continue to become smaller so long as you have very little stimulation, very little intensity, very little strength. So it's not, we can't override from the beginning of that, but we need to incrementally bring it back. So she learned that, she understood that, and she came on as a client with me because she knew that that was the next part of the process for her. And her first week or two was amazing. She got a workout in. Her first workout, I remember she messaged me in the middle of it. She was like, oh my God, I have never felt my body like this. I've never felt my core like this. I've never felt my glutes like this. My nervous system feels so supported. I feel alive. There was an aliveness that she hadn't felt in so long, right? And after that workout, she ended up having a little bit of a crash, right? And it was because it had been so long since her body had felt that level of sensation. so long since her body had felt that level of aliveness, that level of trust, that level of intensity, that level of strength. And this is why it's so important to do it incrementally, right? So she wasn't overriding, she wasn't pushing through, but her nervous system still had a bit of a response to that simply because she had been in collapse for so long. So this is where we have to get really slow and make sure we're not swinging too much, right? And she was able to like mobilize out of that, which was really good. But then she said to me, we had this conversation, she said, I feel so much resistance. And in the past, I would have defined this resistance as a sign that my body didn't have capacity, that it was time to rest, right? I would have like, in the override world, resistance is like, push through, you just gotta want it. It's just because you're a lazy piece of shit. Let's get this thing done. But in the, I've really experienced a harrowing experience in my body and I'm collapsed and I am afraid and hypervigilant with pain and symptoms and I feel fragile. Resistance is like, oh no, I can't do that. That might push me over the edge again. I can't do that. So you can see how like the approach to the response to that is very different in both of these worlds, right? And neither of them is ideal. But I said to her, I was like, there's a real difference. And because she said to me, she was like, this doesn't feel like it felt a year ago. A year ago, I really needed the rest. I really needed the total time to just be in my body and just resource and resource and resource with rest and sunlight and food and minerals and resource and connection and love and resource. Like I really needed to fill up my empty bucket of resources before I could engage in any level of stimulation or intensity. And that can happen usually in the seasons of body-led forced surrender. I took a whole year off the gym. Now I was still doing gentle mobilization here and there because it's what I do, but sometimes that's necessary. She said to me though, this feels really different. This resistance is not the same. It's not my body giving me the cue of like, no, we can't do that. It feels a little bit like fear and hypervigilance, but it feels more like, she said to me, she said, it feels more like this is exactly the thing that I need to do and I know it. And so she's already learning to feel the difference between healthy resistance that needs to be slowly walked towards and a real genuine cue from your body that this is not the time for it. Very different things. And we talked a little bit about in the somatic world, we talk a lot about resistance being a sign that we are right at the edge of exactly what we need to move forward. And maybe the body doesn't quite have capacity for that yet. So we have to build a relationship with working with resistance so that we're not busting through it, but we're also not backing up and not addressing it all, but rather building a relationship in the same way we build with the body as a whole with that resistance and just touching it, prodding it, walking into it with safety, walking out of it, listening, like really working that resistance. And if you've ever done any SE work, you'll probably know a lot of people talk about this, especially Irene Lyon. If you want to dive deeper into SE work in a more self-study environment and learn a lot, Irene Lyon is great. She's got an online course called Smart Body, Smart Mind. But she talks in the very beginning in depth about how resistance is a huge part of the process. The body knows I'm in a place where I'm going to break old patterns that my body created to keep me safe. So the body's perception is like, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. But it's really different than that's not what I need. It actually is, that is exactly what I need. And it scares the living fuck out of me, right? Your system is responding in that way. So in SE, resistance can sometimes look like approaching the work and then suddenly getting really spacey or not being able to focus or just suddenly getting really sleepy. Like it's a really common, like when I was deeply, and I still am in my healing journey, like watching the videos, she even said this would happen. She said it's a really, really, really common pattern, which is so interesting She was like, you'll open the videos and you'll be like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to learn. I'm focused. Whoa, I'm so tired. I think I just need a nap instead. Right. I think I just need to, I'm tired. Ooh. And it's like the body responding to not, oh, this isn't what I need. This is what I need, but it's that resistance. So how do we work the resistance, right? By telling the difference between override and healthy resistance, which is to be worked with, played with, boxed with, walked into, walked out of, like just as we are attuning to the body and resourcing, right? Like that's the process. And so we talked through it because I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks. And when she finally reached out, she was like, look, dude, I have so much resistance. And I was like, yeah, good. Let's build a relationship with this. Because her body was scared. Like her body knew that this level of aliveness was what she desired. But after her experiences previously, where that much sensation and stimulation and aliveness in her body led her into a place that was very scary, her body's, leaning away. And it does bring me back. Relationships are just the best analogy because you have a relationship with your body. And your attachment style is fucking playing with that too. So like, when we have a series of relationship experiences that are very volatile or very unhealthy or very scary or very hurtful for us, right? We might go into the next relationship and we might start reading things in that relationship in terms of those old experiences, even when that's not what's happening, right? Like, oh, I'm interpreting this as someone's going to abandon me, or I'm interpreting this as something's not right here. Not because that's true, but because my body remembers that, right? And so the reality is that, assuming this is a healthy situation, there's an opportunity for me here to lean into this. But I'm going to have resistance to it because it's good for me, right? Whereas usually we don't have quite so much resistance to going back to the old pattern because for some reason that like feels good and activates something in us. It's like the person who's actually going to activate the abandonment wound is like so attractive and we're head over heels. And then the person that like really wants to stick around and work through this is the one that we're like, whoa, it's kind of the same thing, right? So yeah, it's just a really interesting conversation that we had. And I think deconstructing discipline is such an important part of the conversation for me because the clients I work with, like, one, they're no strangers to discipline. They are not the kind of people that need me to babysit them and discipline them. Like, because again, the body talks dialogue is all about reinstilling a relationship with your body, a dialogue with your body, which also means a feeling and a sense of personal sovereignty in your body. So if you're hiring a fitness coach that is doing it all from motivation and discipline and messaging you and just making you do the thing, you're actually like, not only are you not building everything that I just said, but you're actually like playing into the old loop, the old pattern that is the reason you're stuck, right? Like you basically hired somebody to be the parent that you had as a kid so they can yell at you to do the thing. And you're going to resist that because that's not what your body's asking for. Your body is asking for a relationship, especially if you've been through a season of body-led forced surrender where it's very obviously telling you that now. So I think it's really important because a lot of us, we keep going in this cycle of like, oh, I need someone or something to make me do the thing. And that is exactly the problem that we're having to begin with, is that energy, that cycle is actually why we're not consistent. And this is outside of like the training part, the, working through the hypervigilance with body pain and symptoms. Like, this is what body talks means to me. This is creating a population of people that are, one, not conditioned into that like old way of thinking, and which is deeply connected to a disconnection from the body and a disconnection of personal sovereignty, which, call me a conspiracy theorist, but how many reasons can you think of that making a population of people conditioned into that belief? Like, how many reasons can you think of that would be the case? How easy is it to influence and keep people on a hamster wheel? For anything, weight loss, fitness just being one rather more trivial example, right? it really is about reinstilling personal sovereignty. And your body is asking for that. It's asking for that with the pain. It's asking for that with the symptoms. It's asking for that with the body-led forced surrender and the energy explosions in your life as a whole and the full stress bucket and the breakdown. It's asking for that. It's asking for you to listen. It's asking for you to have a relationship. It's asking for you to go through the work of building that relationship, which might be messy. And ultimately, it's asking for you to find an embodied sense of personal sovereignty because those things have been built, in which your relationship with discipline and your approach to it is nothing like you believed it had to be, and actually becomes very consistent and quite easy to maintain. So that's it for today. I try to cap myself at 45 minutes because I could yap. I could yap for a long time. But I hope you guys like this one. Leave any comments. I know we've got a couple new followers on here. Slowly growing this thing. And let me know your thoughts. See you later, guys.